Analog hardware with digital recall. Now, this is a real good question. How do I feel about it? I love it. I honestly, I really love it. And I think a lot of manufacturers will end up going down this route. I think the only reason a lot of them won't is because there's a lot of development that you have to do to create a plugin. There's a whole new different side to a company that works with analog equipment, to then have to incorporate a connection to, like, a USB to a computer, and then create an app. There's someone who it would have to be outsourced to someone, or someone would have to be brought in. So there'll be a few companies that won't go down that route, but I think you'll find a lot of new companies will kind of incorporate this technology. Like, we've got Bettermaker, you've got Freqport, you've got West Audio. They're all companies that are doing this. McDSP as well. These companies are really it's really impressive, to be honest. I love working with hardware that has that, it's just digital recall. You still get hands-on with the equipment. You can't with the McDSP, but with the West Audio stuff, you can see I've got the NG bus the NG bus comp up there, and it's a huge time saver. And there's a few reasons why. And people might say, well, you know, it's not that hard to dial in a few settings. Yeah, of course. Like looking at the 1951 and 1954 EQ, that probably takes me best part of 30 seconds to recall it. You know, you can see there, I've got the Flock Audio patch app with DX, which I put all the pictures on there. So I can take a picture of the, like a snapshot of the piece of equipment and recall it. It takes 30 seconds. However, it's highly time consuming over multiple pieces of equipment. And there's another reason why it's so good, and that is that you find you will use pieces of equipment that have this digital recall. You find you will use them slightly different to how you would an analog piece of equipment that is all analog, has no digital recall or anything like that. The ways that you use them differently is you're conscious of the fact that you may at some point have to recall the settings. And even the best engineers in the world still have to recall sessions every now and then. Files get sent wrong, you know, things like that. Edits, revisions are always required, no matter how good you are. So you will have to recall a session every now and then. And when you do, it's a bit of a pain. But when you're mastering a track, you are conscious of, maybe I won't go to 0.75 because that's slightly harder to read from a picture than it is to just go to 1 dB, for instance. So you will consciously aim for certain markers on the actual piece of hardware. And that's all because you will have to recall it at some point. And if you do have to recall it, it's far easier to recall something when it's bang on the marker and you can visually see that it's on the marker that's on the hardware, compared to something that's slightly off. The other good thing is, with the digital recall stuff, you can go wherever you want. You can find a sweet spot. You don't even have to look. You can find where it needs to be, and then it's recalled bang on there. So you haven't got to look for these markers. You haven't got to be conscious of those markers. There's lots of reasons. There's the obvious time saving, right? The other one is like the dB steps on hardware that is digitally recallable is far finer. So you'll find in most hardware, you know, you're talking 0.5 dB. steps. Whereas hardware that's digitally recallable, it's very fine. You can go 0.25 steps, and that's great for mastering. The other thing that I've found with the majority of hardware that is digitally recallable is it's all got mid-side in it as standard, which is brilliant. The West Audio stuff all has mid-side. The Bettermaker stuff all has mid-side. It's, you know, it's not an option you'll have to have and you'll need every time, but it's an option you've got that's really good. So yeah, I mean, I'm currently in the position, you'll notice there's a little space here and a little space there. Now, this week I'm hoping the West Audio NG Tube EQ will arrive, which is going in there. And then I've also got the Carnaby Audio HE2, which is going in there. Now, the reason I'm starting to pick up a lot of digitally recallable hardware is because it's not necessarily for the convenience of recall. It's more a case of when I'm mixing, I am recalling a lot of stuff. So mixes require a recall process. Now I could quite easily put all this pieces of equipment, I could put them over the mix bus, for instance. And the issue there is that I have to kind of, I like to stand and mix. So when I stand and mix, and this is the reason I put these pieces of equipment that are what I'm going to put over the mix bus. This is why I've put them up high. So when I stand and mix, I don't actually have to touch any of the equipment because I've got the S4. They have plug-in control, so I'm still working with a plugin that's controlling a piece of hardware. So I map it perfectly to the Avid S4. It feels like I'm working on one of these units, for instance. So there's a lot of really cool advancements in that side of things, and I really do think that a lot of companies will end up going down this route of incorporating digital recall and digital control, because what it does as well is it bridges the gap between analog hardware and plug-in users. So plug-in users, you know, people who work in the box, they're used to working in the box. They've grown up working in the box. They've never really explored going out the box and using analog hardware, you know. Whereas, you know, I grew up with the hardware, and then plugins started to develop, and it was, you know, that was a really nice way to go and kind of incorporating them both. But now what we have is we have the great sound of analog with all the convenience of plugins. The only inconvenience for someone who's working in the box previously is that, you know, you've got conversion and you've got the fact that you're going to need more ins and outs on your interface. But ultimately, you are getting a better sound using analog hardware. Now, I've noticed myself, you know, I've started putting the West Audio over the mix bus. I'm then going to put the West Audio, excuse me, West Audio Tube EQ over the mix bus too, and then I'm going to put the Carnaby HE2 over the mix bus as well. Now, the reason I'm using those three over the mix bus is because I recall a session. I recall sessions a lot. You know, when I'm mixing, I'm constantly recalling the session. And, you know, you might recall it 3-4 times, and it's instant. You know, I open a session and all these pieces of equipment are going to just instantly recall, which is, it's for someone, for a mix engineer, that's heaven. Because you imagine working on a big analog console and everything just instantly recalls. Like the majority of consoles, you know, if it has got recall, the SSLs with total recall, you still got to go around and turn all the knobs. So you still got to make everything back to where it was. Whereas this is the way we want well, It's the way I want the industry to go. It's the way I want hardware. I tell you, I'd love a full analog hardware of high quality, absolutely exceptional pieces of analog equipment that were all 100% digitally recordable. That would be heaven, because then just, you jump in session to session to session, it's opening and it's opening back up exactly as it was. Now, the other thing with it is one of the benefits of using these digitally recallable pieces of hardware is, they do set back to exactly where they was. There's no difference to where you left it. Whereas, there are human error when you recall a session. There is somewhat, every now and then there can be human error. You can look at a picture 100 times and still maybe one time put it in slightly wrong, miss one of the, set it to 7 instead of 8. It's happened, and it's doable. Everybody's done it. You won't input the exact settings every single time. 99% of the time you'll do it and it will be exactly the same, but that 1% one time, you won't, and there'll be a slight difference, and you'll reference it and you go, yeah, there's a slight difference. Where is the difference? You'll look back at the thing. Oh, I didn't put that to 4 when I had it at 3. So that just takes the digital recall aspect, just takes that all out. It's just instantly recalled, and yeah, I really hope more manufacturers start going down this route. I know there's going to be, these boutique type designers and people who are bringing out gear. It's a big thing to incorporate. It's a whole new ball game. It's going down a whole different route of, incorporating plugins into hardware. But more and more, I see it happening, which is brilliant, and I really like the way it's going.